You see how it says you find a nice soft seat, and then suddenly everybody spots that soft seat. It's like this is the bleachers. This is where to watch the world go by from a nice soft seat. But okay, this structure is the thing to talk about right now. So originally, a guy said that he believed he could build this entire structure in 4 days, and currently it's not complete. It has a couple of tiny things to be done still. And so hopefully we'll be getting to that in the next week, and then it'll be done. But 4 days, and I think it is possible that this thing could have been built in 4 days if all of the materials were sitting right here ready to go. It would have been a push. It would have been like 2 or 3 people doing it. But this is a lot of storage space, and the total cost of materials on this was $93. Because, you know, we've got loads of these loggy bits sticking out of the ground. Some are greener than others. Some of them still want to be trees, and they're in a place where we don't want them to be trees. And so we take them down and bring them over here and build things. And so you'll see that these aren't even peeled logs. This is, we put in a bunch of posts in the ground, and we started stacking the logs up in the back, and then as we filled it up with dirt on the back side, it pins the logs to the structure. And then we throw some logs on the top, and then when we throw dirt on top of those, it holds them down. And we've got some billboard material that we got for free. And so there's a couple of spikes here and there kind of holding some bits together, and that's about the extent of it. But we've got a lot of storage here. And on the other side, which faces the road, it just looks like a berm.
Which way does your prevailing wind come from? So do you get snow in here ever?
This property gets oodles of snow, but I've never seen snow come into this structure. And one of the last things to do at this point is to reshape the ground a little bit so that the water flows away from the structure. One time I did see water in here, but it was like while it was under construction. And so then we had a deluge rain, and you know, we just came out and we reshaped the ground to keep the water going away. But we've got some more to do in that space.
And don't you kind of think that the permaculture courses help with this a little bit, understanding the slope of your ground and where you're directing your water to and where you're directing your water from? What's going to happen when it rains here? Or what kind of course would that be? Because I know that I didn't do any kind of education.
I would say the earthworks course. And I gotta say, I want to emphasize to people, do your earthworks first. You got to do that at the very beginning. And so often people get a piece of property and they start planting everything, and then they're loving the things that they plant, and they got amazing, awesome stuff. And then they realize that they need earthworks, but now they got to kind of kill everything in order to be able to like do their earthworks. And so you got to do your earthworks first. So now before you do your earthworks, you got to know what the hell you're doing. And so I've got the 3 DVD set about world domination gardening, which is 3 DVDs about earthworks, ponds and hugelkultur and terraces and swales. And then Jeff Lawton's got some stuff, and there's a Kickstarter going on right now with Grant Schultz about some more. But so there's resources out there, and not to mention the fact that there's a bunch of books. There's lots of books. The Big Black Book by Bill Mollison mentions a lot of earthworks, and so get your head wrapped around earthworks. However you go about doing it, you don't have to buy my stuff, but you could. And then do your earthworks first. Is it covered in a permaculture course? I'd say a little bit. A PDC is kind of trying to cover 14 different topics in 2 weeks, complete with field trips and guest speakers and so much other stuff. And it's like earthworks ends up being 1 day out of 14 days, and they're going to cover a lot of things in a lot of climates. It's a lot. So they do a reasonable job.
And I would have to say, everybody who watches my channel, the reason I have a poison pasture is because I did not do any of that, and I did exactly what Paul just said. I went in and I planted my trees first. And so once they were planted and I found out, because this was almost 5 years ago, and Paul hadn't started preaching about the berms yet. And so I was listening to talking about permaculture, not berms, and we didn't put the berms in. And now I've got all these beautiful trees that are 4 years old, and it breaks my heart to go in and kill my trees. So I haven't put earthworks in because my trees are in the way.
Do your earthworks first.
Yeah.
I've been to a lot of places that are labeled as like this is some super duper professional permaculture person and their permaculture project, and they did no earthworks, and then it ends up having a lot of problems.
And what does your earthworks do for you? There's so many things the earthworks protects you from, or channels, or...
Well, I mean, let's imagine if you've got a big flat landscape and it's just a big flat patch, then you have no way to control the temperature on anything. And everything everywhere is exactly the same. The amount of carbon in the soil is the same, the nitrogen in the soil is the same. The amount of every kind of nutrient is the same. It's all homogeneous. It's all the same. You might find 4 or 5 different kinds of plants that will do well on that, and everything else will be a bit of a struggle and you're trying to get it figured out. But now let's suppose you add texture to the landscape. You add berms, you add hugelkultur, you add ponds, you add all kinds of crazy wonky shapes. Now there's spots that are wet, spots that are dry, spots that have a high pH, spots that have a low pH, spots that have a lot of nitrogen, spots that have not so much nitrogen. Everything's different and wonky, and there's diversity everywhere. There's diversity on the outside, there's diversity on the inside. I mean, if you've got a berm or a hugelkultur like this, and the sun generally comes this way, whereas before everything's going to be the same temperature. Now you've got this side ends up being pretty warm, and this side ends up being pretty cold. You have diversity. The other thing is that when the rain falls, before it was all the same. Everything gets the same amount of moisture. But some plants don't like a lot of moisture, and some plants are basically swamp plants. So you do this, and everything at the top is really dry, and everything down here at the base is really wet. So things that are super thirsty go down here. Now, if you're inside of like an arid region or desert, then it's kind of like, well, what you're going to grow up here is going to be pretty scrubby and useless, and you're probably not going to do much with it. But you're going to have jungle growing down here, where otherwise your desert stuff isn't going to be able to deal with it. And a lot of this stuff is all about how to get acres and acres and acres of food growing without any irrigation.
And it works. When you do it in the right spot, it does work, and you stop having poison pastures, and you get to grow your weeds. And then when your weeds are done growing, it starts to grow other things, and it becomes a system rather than a hyper managed, if I ever leave, everything's going to die. You know?
Let's go look at it working.